it's Michelle from Made by Michi. Thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to make a slimline card using a stamp set from Maker Forte's newest release. The stamp set is called Live Life in Full Bloom. It has a nice variety of sentiments, which are perfect for 8-2 or slimline cards, but also has a nice big floral, a nice big scripty sentiment, which is perfect for a slimline card. And those are the two that I'm going to use today. So to start, I grab my Misty and the large floral image, as well as a card front base of 8.5 by 4 inches. I place the card front base and the floral image in my Misty so that the floral image is centered over the card front. And then I go in with the Color Hive Remarkable Ink Pad in Eclipse Black from Maker Forte. This is really nice, intense black, but which is fantastic. Excuse me, but I forgot to prime the stamp before, as it was the first time I'd used my stamp, so I did have to stamp it 3 times. But that's a great thing with the Misty. You can stamp over and over again as long as you don't move your paper at all. You will get you can stamp over top the previous images and it'll all be good. So then I go in with a few Copic markers to do some coloring. I didn't do any fancy shading or color or anything because, to be honest, I am not a professional when it comes to Copic coloring, but I get by. My coloring skills are all right. I'm not going to complain. So I just did some basic coloring, a little bit of shading using a flicking technique. My 3 greens that I did today are G00, G02, and G05, and because the stems, there's not a whole lot to the stems, I just did some really simple coloring and shading with those. And then the 4 pinks that I used today are R20, R81, R83, and R85. And for the petals, I just did some flicking with the markers, and I didn't actually take the color all the way to the edges of the petals, excuse me. So there's a little bit of a white edge all around the petals. Again, and I did actually start with my dark colors and go to my lightest. I don't really have a specific method that I always start with light and go to dark, or vice versa, start with dark and go to light. But today I decided to start with the dark colors and go light. So yeah, so just did some basic shading using flicking technique and took the color almost right to the edge of the petals, but just left a little bit of white all around. And then I just went back if I needed a little bit extra color anywhere, if I missed a few petals. And yeah, just add a little bit more color to them. The petals that you see that are kind of curled up the back of it, I just added the lightest color to those. And that's it for my Copic coloring. So I went back in with my Misty, part my card front back in there, and then grabbed the large scripty sentiment, which is actually called Live Life in Full Bloom, the name of the stamp set. And I centered that as good as I could over my floral image. And to make sure that I had it straight, because even though the bloom is nice and scripty, you don't have to worry about that being completely straight. There is the Live Life in Full that I want to make sure I had those 4 little words straight. So I did grab a ruler and butted that up against the inside of my Misty to make sure that I had the stamp lined up straight for those 4 little words there. Because I am going to be heat embossing this, I went in with a little anti-static powder and brushed that all across my card front. And for the heat embossing, I used the Color Hive Clear ink pad for heat embossing, watermarking, and powder techniques from Maker Forte. This is a perfect ink pad, excuse me, for heat embossing. So I went in with that and I inked up my sentiment twice, and I grabbed some fine detail gold embossing powder and sprinkled that all over my image. Again, using that anti-static powder will get rid of any static from the paper. I don't know if there was anything left from the Copic coloring or whatnot, but just to make sure that the embossing powder sticks only where I want it to on my sentiment and nowhere else on the card. But if it does, I have a little paintbrush that I kind of brush away if I get any little strays. So I wanted to heat emboss that a second time. So I went back in, I added it to my Misty again because I left my stamp in there. I did not remove that. It will stamp again in exactly the exact same spot over top. And just heat embossing twice, it just kind of smooths out the heat embossing, the initial one. It just makes it a little bit more bolder. And I actually sometimes like to heat emboss 3 or even 4 times. And if you have like a die cut sentiment, it's fantastic. Heat emboss 3 or 4 times instead of just once if you ever do that. So again, I just add my powder and melt that using my heat gun. I just wanted to add a little bit of color to my card front, so I just went in with spun sugar distress oxide ink, and a blending brush, and just did some really, really soft, really light ink blending all around the edges, and not quite going into right to the edge of my image, but just some really soft, light ink blending all around it. And then I trimmed it down 1/4 inch off of all 4 sides, just to clean up the edges, and so that would be a little bit smaller than my card base. And I want to add a little bit more heat embossing, another little detail. So I grabbed my clear heat embossing ink pad from Maker Forte, ran my card front, all 4 edges along my ink pad, added some more powder to that. And I took a little brush to it to clean it up, because I did have a little bit that came in too far away from the edge of my card base. But this is a nice little detail to add to it. Adds a little bit of definition and kind of ties in the heat emboss sentiment a bit as well. So I just add a little bit of the gold embossing powder all around 4 edges, and just grab my heat tool again and melted all of that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That's exactly the look that you want with this. So it's a nice little detail again to tie in the gold embossed sentiment. And so then to add it to my card base, pretty much every card of mine is always popped up. The card front is usually always popped up on my card base, unless it's a 1-layer card. But for this, I grabbed my foam tape and added some to my card front, and grabbed my slimline card base, which was, I started with a card base of 8.5 by 8 inches and scored that in the middle so that it ended up being 8.5 by 4 inches, and added that to my card base. I add a little bit of tape on the inside to hold it flat so I can get it nice and centered. And then I grab one of my go-to sequins, which is a really nice pink, really nice, iridescent pink, and add a scattering of sequins to the front of it. I always find that the hardest part of making cards, exactly where I'm going to add the sequins. So I add some sequins using my jewel picker stick from Maker Forte. It's a nice little tool to have, and it's super pretty to look at. So I grab my fancy porcelain dish, add sequins to it, and add them to my card base, and that is it. I hope you have enjoyed my card for today. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to hit that like button, leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and subscribe. Until next time, thank you. Bye.